The following program was produced by an independent community producer. The opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of the ECAT staff or board of directors.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. It's the Ron Van Dam Show.
Hold on tight, things can get a bit weird, if you like that sort of thing.
Hey, welcome to the program. It's great to have you here with open arms for you. How are you? Good to be with you. Is this right? Is it too high? Is it too low? Is this okay? To the left, to the right way? Am I good? Fine. I'm going to spend the next half hour with you. You don't have to do this. I'm warning you ahead of time. You can do something else. Go bake a cake or something. But don't do both at the same time. I don't like that. I don't like people who say, oh, I can multitask, and then they do two things, both horribly. Concentrate on what you're doing. All right, that's it. That's all I've got to say. Have a nice weekend. Bye, everybody. I wish it were that easy. Well, yeah. Hi. I just don't feel like doing this today, to be honest with you. I just don't. But I have a commitment that I've made, and I fulfill my commitments all the time because that's the kind of person I am. If I project one type of quality, it should be that I'm dependable. I'm like the Depends undergarment pads. I'm always there when you need me, but afterwards, toss me away. Every once in a while, you know, you're doing something and then it's a quiet time all of a sudden and you're sitting there and it's quiet and you start thinking. I just want to tell you, don't do that, because when you just sit there and think, awful things can happen. Your mind takes you to places that seems like you want to go, but then when your mind takes you there, it's, oh no, mind, where are you taking me? No! But it's too late because you're already on the journey. Yeah, beware of this. That happened to me a couple of days ago. I was sitting in my office chair, and it was quiet for some reason, and everything was quiet. And I just stopped. I just stopped what I was doing, and I sat there, similar to doing this show for half an hour, and I just sat there, and my mind just took me somewhere. It pretty much just took me captive and brought me to a place. It brought me back to my childhood. And what was glaring to me, because this is the kind of show that I do anyway usually, it was how crazy was childhood. Now, what we all have in common is not that cold sore on your face. That's not what we all have in common. A lot of us do, but not all of us. What we all have in common is we were once children. You kind of can't get around that. As long as you are in this life, you were born to someone, and they raised you. Might have done a horrifically horrible job, or might have been the most pleasant thing you could possibly imagine. There are all kinds of stories in the big childhood world. But we all went through a childhood, which means we went through a time in the past. Now, even if you're listening to this show and you're a young adult, or an older teenager, you were still younger at a point. This is especially significant if you're an older adult. And I don't know what the definition of that is. It pretty much is this. This is older adult. Middle age? I don't think so. Older? Yeah, maybe, I don't know. Mentally, no. Physically, yeah. Senior? Senior to what? What does that mean? I don't even understand. It was always odd to me that you would meet somebody and say, hi, how are you? What do you do? Well, I'm a senior. Oh, does that mean that you're in your last year of high school, or that you're like 87 years old? I can't tell by looking at you. Well, usually can. Anyway, so my mind brings me back to my childhood, and it just became glaringly so obvious that it's amazing that we all survived childhood, because there were no restrictions really. It depends on how old you are. If you're a millennial, Generation PP, whatever they call these things these days, the X generation, the W generation, whatever. I'm sure that when you were growing up, you can make a differentiation and say, no, things were different when I was growing up. I think most people can say that, if not all. And I wonder how I survived childhood. I remember my parents used to say, Ronnie, they called me Ronnie. Ronald is my full name, but don't you dare call me that. I like to go by Ron. My parents called me Ronnie. And some of my close friends, my close female friends now, still call me Ronnie. And I think I'm beyond that, but maybe not. So my parents said, Ronnie, go out and play and have a good time. And I would run out and play in the backyard. I would bounce a ball or something, or I don't know what the hell I was doing. But when I was thirsty, I didn't go inside the house for a glass of water. No. I went to the garden hose, and I turned the faucet on, the outside faucet on the house, and I took the garden hose and I stuck it in my mouth. And if I felt very sanitary that day, I would take the garden hose and put it near my mouth, open up my mouth, stick my tongue out, and just lap it in like a water fountain. But the water came from the garden hose. And sometimes, if it was a seasonal situation and the garden hose wasn't hooked up, or weren't hooked up, which is grammatically incorrect, I would just take my big face and I would stick it under the faucet, the outside faucet, and turn it on, and I would just lap it up that way. How did I survive? Because now, what's our water now? We're sanitary. Oh, I get my water from the springs, the Poland springs, not the one in Maine, the one in Poland. Or I get it's from an artesian well that's crafted by the artisans, and it's finely coddled and aged overnight in a water vessel gleamed by the gods. That's how we drink water now. But I had it out of a garden hose, and so did you, depending on how old you are. How did I survive that? And now I think back, and the water going through this disgustingly bug-infested garden hose into my mouth, into my body. The water traveling through the dirty outside pipes, the rusty, corroded pipes, into my mouth, into my organs. How am I even walking upright? That's a question whether I actually do walk upright. We can have an argument about that. But you know what I'm talking about, don't you? How did I survive that? My mother had a TR3, which was a model of a Triumph. Triumph was a small sports car. She always wanted one. And when I was growing up, there was one car in the family, and that was it. It was the family car. A family had a car, and that was it. But as time progressed, sometimes somebody in the family got another car, and then there were two cars in the family. My mother wanted a TR3 Triumph, and for those that are, I believe that was a British sports car. It didn't really have a back seat; it had a back shelf. And my mother used to drive us to the supermarket and things like that. And we sat in the back on a shelf, and there were no seat belts. There were no seat belts. And even in regular cars, children didn't have seat belts on in the back seat. Not in those days when I was growing up. You could put them on if you wanted. Most cars did have seat belts, but nobody used them. Drivers didn't wear seat belts. Passengers didn't wear seat belts. There might have been an airbag or two. I don't remember because I don't remember. But driving was get in the car and drive. There were no regulations. There were no, you have to do this, you have to do that. And it's amazing that I survived that too without wearing seatbelts, sitting on the back shelf of a sports car with your mother, going to the supermarket, and on the way home, the shopping bags would basically be in my lap because there was no trunk to this car. How did I survive? Unbelievable. I was just brought up like in a world that didn't really know anything. The world was deceptively stupid. And as stupid as I was as an inexperienced child, I think my parents were even more stupid than I was. Because they had no intelligence to pass down to me. None. On Sundays, my grandparents lived in New York City. I was brought up in Teaneck, New Jersey. I'm not gloating. And we would go into the city when I was growing up, and my grandparents lived in a hotel. And they didn't know how to cook. They didn't really even have a kitchen. They had a hot plate and a small refrigerator. They would go down to the dining room on the first floor of the hotel, and they would have their meals there. It's the way a lot of New Yorkers lived. So we would go down, so if we had dinner with them once a week, or every other week or something, we would go down to this very fancy dining restaurant. And the waiters and the waitresses, and that's what they called them then. They weren't wait staff or servers. They were waiters and they were waitresses. The men were the waiters and the females were the waitresses. That's what they called them, and that's what they did, and that's that. And they were dressed up in uniforms. The guys were almost in tuxedos, bow ties, white shirts, the whole bit. And on the table was a bowl. And in the bowl were sugar cubes. Now, millennials are saying, I don't know what a sugar cube is. I'm sorry, but I don't know what it is. Sugar cube is like dice, the kind that you see when you go gamble, kids. It's dice without the little dots on them, the black dots, and they're pure sugar. The sugar formed in the size of a dice, and they're in a bowl. And when you have coffee, you would take with these little tongs, you would take a sugar cube and put it in your coffee, and that was how you put sugar in it. They didn't have sugar dispenser things, really, especially not in this restaurant, but in most cases they didn't. They were sugar cubes. So my brother and I, we sat there, and when we were waiting for the food to come, we would just start eating the sugar cubes. Pure sugar in cube form. I would have like 10 of these things. It wasn't like I was popping a little cube in my... It was like a number of cubes in my mouth at once. How did I survive that? Now, these days, we don't give kids a lot of sugar because it's not because they'll probably get diabetes when they get older or have a high glucose count. It's not that. It's that they annoy us too much when they're on sugar. They get hyped up, and then we can't live with them. They're just too annoying. That's why we don't give them sugar. It's not. Yeah. Okay. It's not for health reasons. It's not for health reasons. It's to keep the kids calm. Don't hype them up. We ate sugar cubes. When we went to the doctor, I remember this. I would see the doctor. My parents would bring me to the doctor. I was like 10 years old, 8 years old, whatever. And in those days, they didn't have like doctor clinic medical facilities. No, not like they do now. It was usually a guy who had a house, and it was a separate entrance to his house, and that was your doctor. That's the way it was. Independent doctors. And usually their wife would be the receptionist or the nurse. And this is how we lived. But I remember leaving the doctor, and the wife receptionist would say, well, we'll see you in a year, Ronnie. And she'd give me a lollipop for being good. You don't give a kid a lollipop for being good. It's too much sugar. I don't remember for sure, but I believe that my dentist also did that when I was a kid. After the dental exam, I was about to leave, and they had a little a dish of lollipops. Incredibly smart. What a great marketing tool. I'm a dentist, and I take care of kids with cavities. Would you like some sugar? Because I can use the money to put my kids through college. Brilliant. Brilliant. And what kid is going to say no to a lollipop? And what mother is going to say no to a free lollipop for their kid? Things were so different. Times were so different. How do we survive all of this stuff? How do we do that? We were drinking soda like there was no tomorrow. Coke, Pepsi, Dr. and Mrs. Pepper. Your table is waiting. Now we have zero sugar, Coke Zero, Diet Coke. We're aware. We're aware now. Back then, we were freaking stupid. I'll do a show about this maybe some other week here. But smoking cigarettes, the government used to hand them out to the military. Everybody smoked. Infants, when they came out of the womb, they lit up. It was incredible. You could smoke in restaurants, movie theaters, everywhere you could smoke. Everybody smoked. 90% of the population of the world smoked. And in other countries, they still do. We were incredibly stupid. Either it was because we didn't have the correct information, we were being manipulated. I don't know the reasons, but the point is, we were incredibly stupid. Now we're incredibly smart, but the result is we're still stupid. I can't figure that out. When I go to the supermarket now, and maybe it's just me, and maybe it's not just you, when I buy something, I turn the can, the package, whatever, around, and I look at the nutritional label. And I see what's the fat content, what's the sugar content, how many carbs, protein. I look at all of it, and I make my decision as to whether I'm going to put this crap in my mouth or not. When you're a kid, or even when you were adult, when I was growing up, they didn't have these labels. It was not a requirement. They didn't do it, so you didn't know. My mother, my own flesh and blood, who conceived me into the wonderful object that you see before you. She couldn't cook to save her life because her mother didn't cook, and she couldn't cook. She tried to cook. We had dinners in the kitchen, and how do we survive? It was awful. It was awful. It was awful. When I was growing up, parents, mothers, usually were the cooks, and they used lard. Do you even know what lard is? It's just pure, unadulterated fat. Fat in its purest form. I think they called it Crisco just to put a name on it and a brand name, but it was just freaking fat is what it was. And it looked like fat. You know that stuff in your stomach? You know? If you could scoop it out, there's your fat. Cooking it. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Every meal I had fat in it. Fat in a skillet. It's unbelievable. That's what they cooked in. How am I still alive? How is anybody still alive after living like that in the days that I was a child? And I won't tell you when that was because I don't like to reveal my age because a woman never does. And even though I'm not a woman, why should I reveal my age when a woman doesn't? Right? What's up with that? So, I don't know how we survive this. I don't know. Also, when I was growing up, we didn't have diseases. We didn't have them. Oh, we had a choice few. We had measles and mumps. Polio was around. But basically, the measles and the mumps were pretty much all anybody really cared about. Now, there were others, and I'm not being insensitive. There was still cancer, etc. But we didn't talk about it like that. We didn't. It wasn't that prevalent, and if it was, we didn't talk about it. We would never say we had it. It was just the measles and the mumps. And now we got a disease for everything. It's not a question, do you have a disease? The question is, how many diseases do you have, and what are their names? It's like naming your children. And you don't have to be a senior to be diagnosed with some kind of disease. They don't have to be life-threatening, but they have to be managed. When I was a kid and a young adult, we didn't have diseases. Other people did, we didn't. Now, if you don't have a disease, something's wrong with you. Not having a disease is kind of a disease. And anything can be a disease at all. High blood pressure, half of the country has that. Well, then you have heart disease. What? My blood pressure's low. You have heart disease. You like that fat? You like that food? Your cholesterol's a little high. You have heart disease. Now you have heart disease. Eating too much sugar, your glucose levels are pretty high. You eat a lot of ice cream and a lot of cakes and pies, and your body, doesn't process it perfectly. You have pre-diabetes. Didn't say you had diabetes, but you got pre. You got diabetes. Pre-diabetes. You don't have it, but you're going to have it. Now I have pre's. It's precancerous. Okay, let's do something about that. You don't have cancer. It's precancerous. We got to remove it. We got to do something about it. I got tons of pre's. Pre's up the ass. Oh, that's another thing. I only say this because when we were kids and young adults, it didn't come into play. It just didn't come into play at all. I had one doctor when I was a child and a young adult. As a young child, I had a pediatrician. As a young adult, I had a family doctor. That doctor actually came to my house when I was sick. When my parents would call the doctor would come over with a bag. When I saw the doctor come into my bedroom when I wasn't feeling well with that bag, I started feeling well. Just the thought of them having to do stuff to me, I said, okay, I'm feeling good. It's all right. They would come to the house. They would come to the house. They would come to the house. And that was it. That's it. That's it. Simple. Not simple anymore. How do we survive all of that? How do we do that? How do we make it through? When life was so unregulated, it was like the Wild West. Speaking of the Wild West, here's another thing that was weird. You can't do this anymore. When kids were playing around like 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, maybe a little bit older, they had guns because the kids would role play. And they would be cowboys and Indians, basically cowboys. Or they'd be a military soldier. And they'd go running around the neighborhood with a toy gun. They were quite popular. Sometimes there'd be toy rifles, but basically they were toy pistols. Some of them were cap guns. I know some of you millennials don't know what a cap gun is. It was a strip of a little explosive dust, I guess, and when then you would cock the gun, when you would cock the gun and pull the trigger, and it would just make a bang sound, a little snap sound. Some of them, then there were BB guns, which really are guns because that's shooting something out of the barrel at you. That can be horrible. Not a lot of kids in New Jersey with the BB gun, but a lot of kids with toy guns. I mean, kids were walking around with toy guns. You try that now. You try. I dare you. Don't do it. I'm not daring you. This is not a TikTok thing. You walk around with a toy gun, even if you're a kid, you're going to find out the consequences are a bit more discussable. But when I was growing up, Kid with a toy gun, totally normal. Totally normal. Oh, isn't he cute with the toy gun? Nobody says that phrase now. Look at that guy over there walking down the street with that gun. Isn't he cute? No, he's not cute. No, he's not cute. Very, very different. Things are very, very different. How do we make it through our childhood? But we did. Somehow we did. And then technology smacked us in the face about 10, 15 years ago. With social media, cell phones, AI, AIO, smacked us in the face. And everything was supposed to be better and more efficient and information at our fingertips. Well, it made it worse. It took away the innocence of experiencing life. It took it away. And it continues to do so on a fast track. And it's a shame, because those of us that are old enough to know what it was before we had that can make the comparison. These present generations can't make a comparison. They can't figure out what that would be like without this stuff. I was there without this stuff. It was fantastic. This is the age of information. I call it the age of too much information. I was brought up in a time in this world when there was no information. I remember, I saw it on television, I saw parents do this. When they had a question about raising their children, as they were in the process of raising their children, they would go to a book. And there was an author who wrote a book about how to raise kids. And he was the go-to source book. And most families had this book or went to the library to take it out. And the author was a doctor named Dr. Spock. You may remember him from Star Trek. That was Mr. Spock. It's a different thing. Even I got that confused every once in a while. But this was Dr. Spock, not Mr. Spock. Mr. Spock was not a doctor. Maybe he was on the show. I don't know. I don't think he was. He might have been a doctor, but he was Mr., as not to be confused with Mr. Spock and Dr. Spock. Dr. Spock wrote the book, and parents would go running to this book about this guy who was an expert about raising kids. That was all they had. That was all they had. Tell you something else that was kind of weird. We had neighbors. They were. It was Mr. and Mrs. Wright, I believe, was their name. Or it was Ritter or Wright, I don't remember. But they lived next to us in Teaneck, New Jersey. They were the next house. And I would see the husband and the wife all the time. And then, but they never talked to us. We never said hello. They just were there. And eventually, I didn't see the husband anymore. I just saw the wife, Mrs. Wright or wrong, whatever. And she would trim her rose bushes for about 10, 15 minutes and then go in the house. And you wouldn't see her again for a couple of weeks when she'd come out and trim the rose bush again. Never saw her leave the house, never saw her go in the house. We knew something was wrong. We assumed. We didn't know. Apparently they had gotten divorced. But you didn't talk about that. When a divorce happened in the neighborhood, there was no gossip. Nobody knew that. They just figured it out because the guy wasn't there anymore. That's the only way they knew. Only way they knew. Because people didn't reveal themselves. Women never said their age. There were certain questions you don't ask a woman. You couldn't get your family medical history out of your parents because it's none of your business. You didn't know what they earned. I'll tell you something honestly, and you're going to say, Ron, this is screwed up. I didn't know how old my mother was until she passed. Then I got the documents and I saw how old she was. But I had no idea. I don't know if I ever asked her. It never came up. I probably asked her at one point, but she evaded the answer. I don't know if your parents were like this because I don't know how old you are. I think that was from just a couple of generations back. But you didn't discuss this stuff. You didn't discuss your medical history. You didn't talk about your age or your background. It was none of anybody's business. Most stuff was nobody's business. Now, everything is everybody's business, and we go out of our way to make sure that everybody knows our business through social media, through conversation. It's opposites don't attract. I'm out of time. I'll be back next week. I'm on NewEnglandBroadcasting.com, RonVanDam.com. Google my name, Ron Van Dam. You'll find me all over the place. We do a new show every weekday. I can't even talk anymore. Just get out of here.